It started like every other morning. Dim kitchen light, faint scent of coffee, and silence that spoke louder than any argument ever could. I moved through the motions without thinking. Toast in the machine, eggs in the pan, kettle boiling. Mark sat at the table scrolling through his phone, face lit up not by joy, but by the glow of yet another email, another news update, another distraction from me. 7 years married, and most mornings felt like I was sharing a home with a polite stranger. He mumbled, "Morning," without looking up. I replied the same, my voice barely above the soft hum of the fridge. This had become our rhythm. Not cold, not cruel, just empty. A comfortable silence that wasn't comforting at all. There was a time he used to notice when I changed my hair, when I wore a new dress, when I was quiet because something was wrong. Now, I could disappear for hours, and he wouldn't notice until he couldn't find his socks or keys. I placed his breakfast down in front of him. He gave a short nod, his attention still on his screen. I watched him for a moment. Same haircut, same aftershave, same routine. Everything about him was familiar, yet I felt like I didn't know him anymore. Or maybe I just missed the version of him that used to know me. The version that would pull me close while I cooked, kiss the back of my neck, and ask me what I was thinking about. I don't know when we started drifting. There wasn't a big fight or betrayal. Just little things. Forgotten anniversaries. Unfinished conversations. Nights spent back-to-back in bed. I used to talk to him about my day, my thoughts, my dreams. Now I told those things to myself. I didn't even know if he'd notice if I stopped altogether. He finally looked up, gave a quick kiss on the cheek, and grabbed his briefcase. "I'll be late tonight. Big meeting." He was out the door before I could say anything back. The quiet that followed felt heavier than his presence. I sat down alone with my coffee, hands wrapped around the mug for warmth I couldn't find anywhere else. I stared out the window, rain sliding down the glass like tears I didn't have the energy to cry. My reflection in the microwave caught my eye. Same face, different eyes. Dull. Tired. Empty. That kitchen had seen love once. Laughter. Passion. Now it was a place where two people coexisted without touching, without asking, without even trying. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't have guessed, was that everything was about to change. And it would all start here. In this very kitchen. With someone who wasn't my husband. He moved in a month ago. Just a few doors down. I noticed him while walking back from the grocery store, struggling with bags and my thoughts. He smiled, easy, genuine, and asked if I needed help. I hesitated, but let him take a few bags. His name was Caleb. I thanked him, assuming that was it. But the next day, he waved from his driveway, said good morning like it meant something. I wasn't used to that. We talked a little more each day. Brief chats while checking mail or watering plants. He had a warm way of speaking, eyes that stayed with you long after the conversation ended. He noticed details. Told me my dress looked nice. Said my laugh was rare, but beautiful. I told him I was married. He nodded, respectful, but his gaze lingered. I told myself I was just being friendly. I wanted to believe that. He made me feel visible again. Not for how I looked, but for how I spoke. He listened, really listened, to things even Mark wouldn't pretend to hear anymore. One day, I mentioned a book I'd read months ago. The next day, he asked how it ended. I hadn't remembered telling him. That stayed with me. The shift happened slowly. I started hoping he'd be outside when I was. I lingered longer in the garden, started wearing lipstick again, something I hadn't bothered with in over a year. He noticed that too. Said red looked powerful on me. I told him I didn't feel powerful. He didn't respond with empty comfort, just looked at me like I was wrong. The first time he came over, it was raining hard. Mark had texted he'd be late again. Caleb knocked, holding a bottle of wine, said it might go well with the storm. I almost said no, but I didn't. We sat in the kitchen, the wine between us untouched for the first half hour. We talked about nothing and everything, childhood, regrets, dreams. He made me laugh until I remembered I was someone's wife. Guilt flickered, but I didn't ask him to leave. When he stood to go, he took my hand. Just held it. No kiss. No words. Just warmth that felt so dangerous and so needed. All at once. My hand stayed in his longer than it should have. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the way he looked at me before walking out the door, like he saw someone worth staying for. Someone I hadn't seen in myself in a long time. I started waking up thinking of him. Not of love. Not of lust. Just the way I felt when he was around. Lighter. Wanted. Real. I hadn't felt like that in years. And still, I told myself it wasn't anything yet. Just a spark. Just a shadow. I believed that until I realized I was lying. Not to Mark, but to myself. It was started like every other morning. Dim kitchen
I was in
light,
the kitchen,
faint
humming
scent
a
of coffee,
tune without thinking,
and silence
flipping
that spoke
pancakes
louder than
while the
any
smell of
argument
cinnamon
ever
filled
could.
the air.
I moved
Mark
through
had
the
left
motions
early
without
without
thinking. His
Toast
goodbye
in
had
the
been
machine,
rushed, as
eggs in the
usual,
pan,
a distracted
boiling.
kiss, and
Mark
a quick
sat
exit.
at the table scrolling
I didn't
through his
expect
phone.
anyone. Face lit
I
up
wasn't
not by
dressed for
joy,
company,
but by the
when I
glow
heard
of
the
yet
knock,
another email.
I didn't hesitate.
Another news update.
I knew it was him
Another
before I opened the
distraction
door.
for me.
Caleb
7 years
stood there,
married,
holding
and
a
most
small
mornings
bouquet
felt
of
like
white
I was sharing a
tulips.
home with
He
a polite
smiled,
stranger.
said he saw
He
them,
mumbled and thought of
morning.
I
Without
smiled
looking
back
up,
before I could think
replied
better
the
of it.
same.
He
My
stepped
voice
inside.
barely above the
We
soft
both
hum of the
knew we
fridge.
shouldn't have.
This had
I
become
told
our
him
rhythm.
I was just
Not
making
cold,
breakfast.
not cruel,
He asked
just
if I needed
empty.
help.
A
I
comfortable
didn't,
silence
but
that
I
wasn't
said
comforting
yes.
at all.
He moved
There was a
beside
time
me,
he used to notice
close
when I
enough to
changed
feel
my
the
hair
heat from his
when
skin.
I wore a new dress.
We spoke
when I was
softly,
quiet because
almost
something was
afraid
wrong.
to disturb
Now,
something delicate
I could
between
disappear
us.
for hours.
He asked
and
about my morning,
he wouldn't notice
and I
until
told
he
him the
couldn't find
truth.
his socks or
It
keys.
felt empty.
He
Placed
didn't
his
offer
breakfast
pity,
down in front
just
of him.
listened.
He gave
I
a short
steady on
nod.
mine.
His
I
attention
dropped a
still
spoon.
on his screen.
He picked it up.
I watched him for
Our
a moment.
hands touched.
Same haircut.
I didn't move away.
Same aftershave.
There was a silence
same
that
routine.
wasn't awkward.
Everything about
It
him
was
familiar.
heavy,
Yet I
expectant.
felt like I didn't
He
know
brushed
him
flour
anymore.
from my cheek,
or maybe
fingertips barely
I just missed the
grazing my
version of
skin.
him that used to know
My
me.
breath caught.
The version that
I
would pull
turned
me
to
close
face him
while
fully.
I cooked.
I
Kiss the back
searched
of my
his
neck,
eyes for hesitation.
and asked me what I was
There was
thinking
none.
about. I don't know when we
longing.
started drifting.
Just that quiet
There wasn't
kind of
a big
understanding
fight
that
or
makes
betrayal.
words useless.
Just little things.
I kissed him.
Forgotten
It wasn't
anniversaries.
It wasn't
Unfinished
careful.
conversations.
It was soft,
Nights
then
spent
deep,
back to back in
desperate,
bed. But
I
not
used to talk
rushed.
to him about my day.
His hands
my
rested on my
thoughts,
waist
my
like
dreams.
he was afraid.
Now I told those
I
things
might
to
vanish.
myself.
I didn't even
curled
know
around
if
the
he'd
back of
notice
his neck
if I stopped
pulling
altogether.
him closer.
He
than I should
finally looked
have.
up,
The
gave
world
a quick kiss on
outside
the cheek,
faded,
and
there was
grabbed his
only
briefcase.
breath, skin, and
I'll be late
everything I
tonight.
had been missing for
Big
too
meeting.
long. The kitchen
He was out the door before I could
same
say
one that had
anything
grown
back.
cold with routine.
The quiet
suddenly
that followed
felt
felt heavier than
Everything
his presence.
felt louder.
I sat down
The hum of
alone
the
with my
fridge,
coffee,
the rain
hands
against
wrapped
the
around the
window.
mug for warmth.
My
I
heartbeat
couldn't
in my
find
ears.
anywhere else.
I wasn't
I
thinking.
stared out the window.
I didn't want to.
Rain sliding
In that
down the
moment,
glass like
I felt
tears
wanted,
I didn't have
needed
the energy
seen.
to cry.
And
My
I didn't
reflection
care about
in the
the
microwave
cost.
caught my
When I
eye.
finally pulled
Same
away,
face,
I didn't
different
speak.
eyes. Neither
Dull.
did he.
Tired.
We stood there,
Empty.
eyes
That
locked.
kitchen had
breathing
seen
heavy.
love once.
I whispered,
Laughter.
"This can't
Passion.
happen again." Now it was a
He
place
nodded
where
slowly,
two people
but
coexisted
the look in his
without
eyes said
touching,
otherwise.
without asking.
He left without
asking
even
for
trying.
anything more.
But what
He
I
didn't
didn't
know
have
then.
to,
What
what
I
I had
couldn't have
already given
guessed
it, was
I
that
stood
everything
alone,
was about to change.
fingers on my lips,
and it would
the
all
taste
start
of him
here.
still there.
In this
Guilt hit
very
me
kitchen,
hard
and sudden.
with someone who
Not
wasn't
just
my
for what I
husband.
did.
He
but
moved
for
in a
how
month
right
ago.
it had felt. Just a few
I had
doors
crossed
down.
a line.
I noticed him
swore
while
I
walking
never
back
would.
from the grocery
and
store.
I hadn't stumbled.
Struggling with
I had
bags
walked
and my
into it
thoughts.
willingly.
He smiled
in my
easy
own
kitchen,
genuine and asked
where
if
I
I
had
needed
once
help.
promised
I
forever.
hesitated
That
but
night,
let him take
Mark
a few
came
bags.
home early. His
He
name
brought
was
takeout
Caleb,
and a
I
bottle of
thanked him,
wine we
assuming
hadn't
that
opened
was
in
it.
months. But the next
Said
day,
he
he
missed
waved
having
from his
dinner
driveway,
together.
said
I
good
sat
morning
across
like
from
it
him,
meant something.
nodded.
I wasn't
smiled
used
when
to
I
that.
had to. We
I
talked
didn't
a little
taste the
more
food.
each day.
My
Brief
thoughts were
chats
loud
while checking
my
mail
body was
or
quiet.
watering plants.
He held my hand
He had
across
a warm
the
way
table
of speaking
and said,
eyes
he
that
wanted to
stayed with you
reconnect.
long after the
I
conversation
nearly pulled
ended.
away.
He
The
noticed
same
details,
hand that had held
told me
Caleb's
my
just
dress
hours
looked
earlier
nice,
now rested
said
in my
my laugh
husband's.
was rare,
and he
but
didn't know.
beautiful.
For the
I
next few
told him
days,
I was married.
Mark tried.
He nodded.
He complimented my
respectful,
cooking,
but his
asked about
gaze
my
lingered.
day.
I
Even
told
left his phone
myself
in the
I
other
was
room
just being
once.
friendly,
but it felt
I wanted
forced.
to believe that.
Not fake.
He made
just
me feel visible
unfamiliar.
again.
Like he
Not
was
for how I
remembering
looked,
something he
but for
forgot
how
to
I
do.
spoke.
Something he
He
used to be
listened,
good at.
really listened.
I wanted to
to
respond.
things
was even Mark
I wanted
wouldn't
to
pretend
reach
to hear
back,
anymore.
but I
One
couldn't.
day,
There was
I
a wall
mentioned a book
now,
I'd read
a
months
truth
ago.
between us
The
that
next
he
day,
hadn't
he
seen
asked
yet.
how it ended,
But I could
I
feel
hadn't
it
remembered
in
telling
every
him.
moment we
That
touched.
stayed with me.
Caleb
The
messaged
shift
me
happened
twice.
slowly.
I didn't reply.
I started hoping
I
he'd
read
be
the
outside
words
when I
over
was, and
I
over.
lingered longer in the
Simple,
garden.
kind,
Started wearing lipstick
not
again.
pushing.
Something
Just
I hadn't
asking if I
bothered
was
with in
okay.
over a year.
I typed a reply,
He noticed that
deleted
too.
it. said
Thought
Red
about
looked
calling
powerful
Dim.
on me.
I told him
I didn't feel
but
powerful.
I didn't believe it.
He didn't
I
respond
thought about
with
him
empty comfort.
every time I
just
walked
looked at
into
me
the
like
kitchen.
I was wrong.
I saw his
the first
hand
time he
brushing
came
my
over,
cheek.
it was raining
Felt
hard.
his mouth on mine.
Mark had texted
I hated how
he'd be late
easily
again.
memory replaced
Caleb
guilt.
knocked,
One
holding
morning,
a bottle of wine.
Mark surprised me
said
with
it might
breakfast
go
in
well
bed.
with the storm.
He kissed my forehead.
I almost said no
and whispered
but
that
I
he was
didn't.
trying.
We sat in the kitchen,
smiled through the tears
wine
burning
between
in my
us
eyes.
untouched for the
I wanted
first
to tell
half
him.
hour. I wanted
We
to
talked about
confess,
nothing
scream,
and everything,
break the illusion,
childhood, but
regrets,
I couldn't.
dreams.
Not out of fear
He
of
made me
losing him,
laugh until I
but
remembered
because I
I
knew
was
the
someone's
truth would
wife.
destroy
Guilt
what
flickered,
little we still
but
had.
I didn't ask him
I didn't
to
know if
leave.
I wanted to save
when
us
he stood to
or
go,
just
he took
avoid
my
the
hand.
wreckage.
I
Just
wrote a
held
letter
it.
to Caleb.
No kiss.
I didn't send it.
No words.
I told him
Just
everything.
warmth that felt
what he
so
made me
dangerous
feel
and so
what
needed.
I couldn't give him
all at once.
How sorry I was for
My
allowing
hand
it to
stayed
happen.
in his longer
I folded
than
it
it should have.
tucked it away.
I didn't sleep
and
that night.
tried to forget the
I
way
kept
his name
replaying
looked
the way
in my
he looked at me
handwriting.
before walking
now,
out the door.
I moved through the house like
he
I
saw
used to.
someone worth staying
Routine.
for.
Quiet.
Someone I hadn't seen in
Stillness.
myself in
Mark
a long
laughs
time.
more.
I
Touches me
started
more.
waking up thinking
I
of
let
him.
him. Not
But
of
I
love.
flinch sometimes.
Not of lust.
Not because
just
I
the
don't
way
love
I
him,
felt when he was
but
around.
because I no
Lighter.
longer know what that word
Wanted.
means.
Real.
Love didn't stop
I
me.
hadn't felt like
it
that
didn't
in
protect
years.
us.
And
It
still,
just got lost somewhere
I told
between
myself
silence
it wasn't
and
anything
habit.
yet. Every
Just a
morning,
spark.
I stand
Just
in
a
the
shadow.
kitchen, coffee
I
in
believed
hand,
that until I
wondering
realized
how
I
much
was
of me
lying.
still belongs
Not
here.
to Mark.
The smell of
but
cinnamon
to
doesn't
myself.
comfort me anymore.
It reminds me of a moment I can't undo. Mark surprised me with tenderness I thought was gone. Caleb surprised me with passion I didn't expect. But the biggest surprise was my own capacity to betray, to feel so deeply in two different directions. And now I live somewhere in between.